The snow was falling harder than Daniel had ever seen. Each flake swirled in the headlights, turning the empty streets into a blur of white. His old pickup's heater rattled weakly, barely keeping the frost from crawling over the windshield. It had been a long night, another double shift at the warehouse, and all he wanted was a hot shower and the quiet comfort of his small apartment. That's when he saw them, two tiny shapes, curled together on what looked like a pile of trash bags. At first, he thought he was seeing things, snowflakes caught in his exhaustion playing tricks, but something made him slam the brakes. The shapes didn't move at first, and Daniel's heart thudded in his chest. His breath fogged the air as he scrambled out of the truck, boots crunching against the thick snow. "Hey! Hey!" he called, his voice cracking from both cold and panic. "You two, are you okay?" One of the little figures stirred, a small hand peeking out from beneath a thin coat. The other clung tightly, shivering so violently that Daniel felt his own chest tighten in fear. "Oh, God!" he muttered under his breath. He crouched, brushing the snow from their soaked jackets. "You're freezing." A tiny voice whispered, barely audible over the wind. "Please don't take us back." Daniel froze. The words sank into him like ice water. Who would leave children out here in this storm? And what did back mean? He glanced around. The street was empty, the snow turning every corner into a blur. No sign of parents. No one watching. Just them, shivering and scared. His hands trembled as he took off his thick winter coat and wrapped it around them both. He had lost someone once, someone small and warm, and the memory hit him like a punch. He couldn't leave them here. He wouldn't. He lifted the smaller girl first. She barely weighed anything, her tiny body curled into his arms like a fragile bird. The other clung to him as he hoisted her up, and the three of them moved quickly toward the truck. Snowflakes stuck to their wet hair and eyelashes, glittering like tiny stars. As he started the engine, Daniel's mind raced. He wanted to call the authorities, but the thought of leaving them alone for even a moment made his chest ache. Instead, he decided, first get them warm. First, make sure they survive the night. The drive to his apartment was slow. The snow fell harder, the road slick, but Daniel didn't care. He kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror, their faces pale and teeth chattering, the smaller one snuggling closer to her sister for warmth. When they finally reached his apartment, he carried them inside like precious cargo. The warmth hit them immediately, and they gasped, their little bodies relaxing just enough to let him guide them to his threadbare couch. He pulled off his coat and wrapped them in blankets he kept for winter storms. His apartment was small, cluttered with the remnants of a life half-lived. Unwashed dishes, scattered books, a single armchair with a blanket tossed over it. But tonight, it didn't matter. Daniel knelt down and held their tiny hands in his. "You're safe now," he said softly. "You're safe." One of the girls whispered again, barely audible. "Thank you." Her voice, so small and fragile, broke something inside him. Daniel's own eyes stung, and for the first time in years, he let himself feel the raw ache of wanting to protect someone, really protect them. He studied them closely. The girls were twins, he realized, one slightly bolder than the other, both clutching each other as if the world might fall apart if they let go. Their coats were tattered, shoes soaked, and their hair matted from the snow. Something in Daniel's gut told him they weren't just lost. They were hiding from something. Maybe someone, maybe everything. And in that moment, a single thought ran through his mind. "I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." The snowstorm raged outside, but inside the tiny apartment, a fragile warmth began to grow, a warmth that would not be broken. And Daniel knew, without a doubt, that his life had just changed forever. The moment the twins were inside, Daniel closed the door behind him and leaned against it, letting out a slow breath. The snowstorm outside continued its relentless howl, but inside his tiny apartment, there was only the quiet, fragile sound of two children shivering under blankets. Daniel pulled a chair close to the couch and began rummaging through the kitchen. He found an old kettle, a few cups, and some milk. As he poured it into a pan, he spoke softly, almost to himself. "Warm milk. That always helped my little guy." The girls watched him cautiously, their eyes wide, still clutching each other. One of them whispered, "Will you feed us?" He nodded gently. Of course. You're going to be okay. I'll make sure of it. He set the milk on the stove and stirred it slowly, thinking. He didn't know their names yet, didn't know anything about them, yet he felt a protective pull he hadn't felt in years. His heart, which had been dulled by loss and loneliness, stirred painfully alive. Finally, he turned to them. You're going to need something to eat. Can you tell me your names? The bolder of the twins spoke first, her voice quivering. I'm Lily. Her sister, quieter, looked down at the floor and whispered, I'm Rose. Daniel smiled gently, trying to keep his voice steady. Lily, Rose, that's beautiful. All right, let's get you warmed up first. He handed them each a small mug of warm milk, careful not to spill. The girls clutched them like treasures, sipping slowly, their eyes never leaving his face. Afterward, Daniel fetched blankets from a closet and wrapped them around the girls again. He noticed how Lily kept her arms around Rose, holding her tightly as though letting go for even a second would make the world crumble. He squatted in front of them. You've been out there in the cold for hours, haven't you? The twins nodded. Lily's small fingers fiddled with a worn necklace she wore around her neck. Daniel noticed it. It looked old, valuable in sentiment rather than material worth, and something about it seemed familiar. What's this? He asked softly, leaning closer. Lily's voice was almost a whisper. Mom gave it to us. She said it would keep us safe. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. The necklace had a tiny engraving on it, a name he recognized, a memory, half buried and painful, stirred deep inside him. Something about the name tugged at the edges of his mind, teasing at a connection he couldn't yet place. He shook his head, trying to focus on the present. You two are safe here tonight. I promise. Nobody's going to hurt you. The girls looked at each other, then back at him, slowly. Their bodies relaxed, the shivering lessening under the warmth of the blankets, and the small heater humming in the corner. Daniel couldn't help but notice how alike they were. The same dark hair, the same sharp, curious eyes. Yet their personalities were already showing through. Lily was bold, brave even, the one asking questions, making sure he was watching her sister. Rose was quieter, shy, but she observed everything with an intensity that made Daniel ache to protect her. He moved to the small kitchen counter, pulling out a can of soup he had left from dinner earlier. It wasn't much, but it would fill their tiny stomachs. As he heated it, Lily leaned closer. Will you let us stay? She asked, eyes pleading. Daniel paused, spoon in hand, and looked at her. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He didn't know the rules, didn't know what the authorities might say, but in that moment, the answer was clear. Yes, he whispered. As long as you need me, you can stay. Rose whispered softly, her small hand reaching for his. Thank you. Daniel's chest tightened. He remembered the night he had lost his son, how it felt helpless, how the world had seemed to close in. And now, here were these two little girls, trusting him, needing him in a way he hadn't been needed in years. He decided to let them rest for a moment, watching as they curled into each other, eyes slowly closing. The room was quiet except for the faint hiss of the heater and the occasional gust of wind, rattling the windows. Then Daniel's eyes fell on a small, worn photograph that had slipped from one of the girls' pockets. He picked it up gently and froze. It was old, slightly torn, but he recognized the faces. His heart skipped a beat. Who? Who gave you this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The girls exchanged a glance. Lily's eyes widened. Rose's lip trembled. It's from home, Lily said softly. From before? Daniel's hands shook as he held the photo. There was a story here, a story that would change everything. And for the first time that night, he realized he wasn't just keeping them safe from the snow. He was keeping them safe from a past he had yet to fully understand. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, a fragile warmth began to settle, weaving a thread of trust and hope through the small apartment. And Daniel knew, with a certainty that made his chest ache, that nothing would ever be the same again. Daniel stared at the photograph, his hands trembling. The edges were worn, the colors faded, but the faces were unmistakable. His late brother's eyes stared back at him, eyes that were now mirrored in the little girl sitting before him. Lily and Rose. His niece and nephew. No, his nieces. The realization hit him like a punch. His brother had disappeared years ago after a bitter fight with their parents, leaving no trace behind. No one had told him that his brother had children. No one. And now, here they were, shivering in his apartment, trusting him completely. "Lily, Rose," he whispered, his voice cracking. You're my nieces." The girls looked at him, confusion and fear mingling in their wide eyes. Lily clutched Rose closer, protective as ever. "But we thought," Rose whispered, her voice trembling, "we thought nobody would find us." Daniel sank to the floor, holding the photo against his chest. The weight of years lost, of secrets kept from him, pressed down like the snowstorm outside. He had grieved for his brother, for his own son, thinking the worst, never imagining that these little lives had been out there, surviving somehow. He gently pulled the girls onto his lap, letting them cling to him. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I didn't know. I never knew." Lily's brave little voice broke through. "We didn't have anyone, Uncle Daniel. We ran away. They said we had to go somewhere else. But we didn't want to be split up." Daniel nodded, tears streaking down his face. "I understand, and I won't let that happen. You're not going anywhere. Not ever." He listened as they told him about the caretaker who had looked after them after their mother's passing, who had died suddenly, leaving them to the streets. The foster system had failed them. They had been shuffled from home to home, whispered about as too fragile or too difficult, until finally, one cold night, they had curled up together on trash bags in the snow, hoping for warmth, hoping for safety. Daniel's chest ached. He thought of every night he had spent alone, every tear he had hidden from the world. And now he understood the magnitude of what these girls had endured. And yet, here they were, alive, trusting him, seeking safety in his arms. "I promise you," he said firmly, looking into their eyes, "I will take care of you. I will fight for you. You are my family now, and nothing will separate us." The twins wrapped their tiny arms around him, and for the first time that night, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the fleeting hope of surviving another day, but the deep, unshakable hope of family, of belonging, of love returned. Outside, the storm continued, but inside the small apartment, a fragile warmth wrapped around them, stronger than any snowstorm could ever touch. And Daniel knew, with every fiber of his being, that nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, the snow had stopped, leaving the city sparkling under a pale winter sun. But Daniel's apartment was far from quiet. Lily and Rose were already awake, chattering softly, moving through the small rooms as if exploring a new world. Daniel smiled, pouring them each a cup of warm cocoa. "Good morning," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. His heart was still raw from the revelations of last night, but there was a new determination shining through. He would not let anyone take these girls away. Authorities came later, as expected. A social worker with kind eyes and clipped clipboard arrived, asking questions about how Daniel found the twins, how long they had been with him. The girls huddled close, whispering to him, their small voices pleading. "Please don't let them split us," Lily said firmly, her eyes shining with urgency. Daniel looked at them, chest tightening. He took a deep breath, meeting the social worker's gaze. "They are my family," he said. "I will take full responsibility. I will not let them be separated. Please, just give us a chance." The social worker paused, clearly moved by the sincerity in Daniel's voice, and nodded slowly. "We'll start the legal process, but I can see that these children are safe with you. We'll do everything we can to keep the siblings together." The fight had just begun, but Daniel didn't feel fear. He felt a resolve stronger than anything he had known before. Over the next weeks, Daniel worked tirelessly. Parenting classes, paperwork, late nights juggling 2 jobs, all to ensure the twins could stay with him. Slowly, the apartment that had once felt cold and empty filled with life. Lily drew colorful pictures on scraps of paper, taping them to the fridge. Rose left tiny socks and mittens in perfect little rows by the door. Their laughter echoed through the rooms, a sound Daniel hadn't realized he missed so deeply. At night, he tucked them into bed, brushing snowflakes from their hair and listening to them whisper their dreams. "I don't want to be anywhere else," Rose said one evening. Lily nodded, squeezing his hand. Daniel felt tears prick at his eyes. "You're home," he whispered. "You're home with me." Days turned into weeks, and the small apartment became a sanctuary. Evenings were spent baking cookies, reading stories, and building small snowmen in the tiny courtyard outside. Daniel watched the girls grow stronger, happier, and more trusting with each passing day. One night, as he watched them sleep curled together under blankets, Daniel realized that his own heart had healed in ways he hadn't expected. He had thought he had lost everything that mattered, but here in the warmth of his small home, he had found it again: love, laughter, and family. For the first time in years, he felt complete, and as the snow fell softly outside the window, Daniel whispered a promise to himself and the girls. "Nothing will ever break this family. We are together now, forever." Winter had returned, but this time the snow felt different. It wasn't a storm to fear. It was soft, gentle, and sparkling under the pale sun. Daniel stepped outside, bundled in his coat, and watched as Lily and Rose ran ahead, their laughter ringing like tiny bells across the quiet street. "Dad, look!" Lily shouted, pointing at a half-built snowman. Rose was already adding a carrot nose, giggling as she balanced it carefully. Daniel smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with his coat. He froze for a moment, letting the sight sink in. The twins, his nieces, were safe, happy, and alive. Their small hands were full of snow, their cheeks rosy from laughter. And he had helped build this moment, this life, from the wreckage of loss and fear. He walked over, kneeling beside them. "That's perfect," he said, ruffling Lily's hair. "You two make a great team." They beamed up at him, eyes sparkling with trust and love. "We're never leaving you, Dad," Rose whispered, clutching his hand tightly. Daniel's chest tightened. He thought of the night he had found them on the trash in the snow, fragile and shivering. How far they had come, and how far he had come as well. From grief, loneliness, and emptiness to a home filled with life, laughter, and love. The snow fell gently around them, blanketing the city in white. Daniel pulled the girls close, and together they watched their little snowman, wobbly but perfect in its imperfection. For the first time in years, Daniel felt complete. He realized that family wasn't only about blood, about what was lost or stolen. It was about the moments you created, the love you gave, and the warmth you shared. As the wind whispered through the trees and the snowflakes danced around them, Daniel smiled and whispered to himself a promise that would last a lifetime. We are together now, forever. And in that quiet, snow-covered world, they were home.